Okay, welcome to Human Factors 101. This is going to be a big thing in our coursework going forward. You're going to be doing shift turnovers, you're going to do a disk profile, you're going to try to really lean into the human factors side of aviation maintenance, because that's really where the metal meets the meat, where really you can make a big difference. Is by simply being a good human and taking care of yourself, so that way when you show up, I mean, honestly, aviation maintenance is not really that difficult. They're expensive planes and they come with directions. You just do maintenance by the book. Where good mechanics and bad mechanics really start to differentiate is whenever you look at the human side of it. How do you live your life? How do you show up for work? How do you interact with other people? That's really what makes a good mechanic from a bad mechanic on a team. All right, so I have my notes here, so bear with me. The greatest impact on safety in the future will not come from improving the technology, rather from educating the employee to recognize and prevent human error. So basically what that means is that, like, we have gotten to the point of diminishing returns with aviation technology. Like, it's going to be very, very difficult to make things even more safe. If you look at like the synthetic vision technology that's out there, if you look at GPS WAS, a lot of the things that caused aircraft crashes in the past won't be a factor in the future. Things are just, or in a technology side, you're about as good as you're probably going to see it ever get. So really where we make our money in terms of improving safety is improving the people that fly and work on things. Now, I have a review of accident-related data indicates that approximately 75 to 80% of all aviation accidents are the result of human error. All right, so that's a pretty interesting number. So 80% of all, so 8 out of 10 crashes had nothing to do with weather or maintenance, but had to do with whoever was behind the wheel or whoever was turning the wrench before they signed it off and let it go. Now, of those accidents, only about 12% are maintenance related. So it means that we have a pretty decent system. So, like, if you have 10 aircraft crashes, 2 things are things that we probably couldn't control. 8 things are things that we could control. And out of those 8 things, only maybe 1 or 2 of them actually have anything to do with maintenance. So while the pilot and co-pilot errors tend to have immediate and highly visible effects, maintenance errors tend to be more latent and less obvious. Now, this is a big one, and it will factor into your aviation maintenance career as you go forward. So whatever you sign off today could have a really big impact 10 years from now. I can remember working on the Boeing production floor on the 737 MAX line whenever the Ethiopia Air went down. Now, that was a big deal for me because I worked power on avionics. I turned power on to that plane. First time the lights ever came on the plane, I was the one flipping the switch. And so whenever the crash happened, I had a sinking, feeling in my gut, thinking like, oh no, what if that's something that we did, something that I'm responsible for? Did I just kill a couple hundred people? And as time progressed on, we found out that it was the MCAS system and the stab had locked out and all this other good stuff. And so a part of that alleviated. You never want to see an aircraft crash, especially one that has that many people, especially as a mechanic. But like, it did take some of the weight off, knowing that, like, it wasn't something that I was directly responsible for. And I've seen several crashes over the years. The only one that I've ever seen that was actually like, a hardware failure, a FADEC went out in a helicopter in Iraq. And luckily they were only about a couple hundred feet up, and they managed to auto-rotate just enough to kind of keep them from dying. But that's, out of all the crashes and all the accidents and stuff like that, just one was a maintenance failure. Okay, several definitions of human factors have been put forward, and while no one definition is officially accepted by the FAA, of all the following definitions are endorsed by the FAA. So I'm going to read a couple of definitions of what human factors are. So human factors are concerned with optimizing performance, including reducing the errors that the highest level of safety is achieved to maintain. So it's like this guy's Ron LaFaro, he's a PhD, works for the FAA, and he talks about, like, this is really kind of performance related. It's hard. I mean, it's easy. Engineering is actually not really that difficult. It's all math driven. It's black and white, and you just follow the path, and it'll lead you where you want to go. When you start talking about dealing with people, things get a lot more complex. You could have a really good mechanic have a bad day, and then people die. You could have a really bad mechanic have a really good day, and just make it out of the skin of your teeth. So there's a lot of complicated nuances to it. Human factors is the study of how people interact with their environments. And that's from the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge in 2003. So human factors is the study of how people interact with their environments. So you think of how complicated people are, how complex people are, and think about how complex the environment is. I mean, you could have a really good person in a bad environment and you get really bad results. You could have like a really bad person in a really good environment and get really good results. So as mechanics, we always want to try to structure our environment so that we can optimize for performance. That means to go to bed on time, don't drink too much, be conscious of who you're hanging out with, and be conscious of like just the general state of affairs in the hangar. Like, is it clean? Is it dirty? Or am I putting things away? Am I 5S'ing my way to success or not? Human factors are those elements that affect our behavior and performance, especially those that may cause us to make errors. So human factors are those elements that affect our behavior and performance, especially those that may cause us to make errors. So what that's basically saying is that you are in control of your environment. If there's something going on in your environment that can cause you to get somebody hurt or killed or an aircraft damaged, it's on you as a mechanic to make that change, whatever that change may be. Maybe it's not working at a place. I can remember applying to a general aviation job, and I walked into their shop, looked to the right-hand side of their door, and they had a bullet heater. It was cold outside, going, it was full blast, right next to their oxygen tanks. And I looked at that and I was just like, if that's the first thing that I've seen as I walk in here, I'm not working here, because I have no idea what else is going on behind the curtain once we kind of start delving into it. And so you want to be kind of conscious of those things and really look and pick apart the environment. That could be like canaries in the coal mine. There could be a problem deeper in that we want to like delve into and either solve if it's your responsibility, or stay away from if it's not, and report if it's like really bad. Okay, the FAA focuses on human factors that lead to improper actions, even though there are certainly human factors that lead to positive outcomes. All right? Human error is the unintentional act of performing a task incorrectly. So unintentional act. I mean, these people aren't terrorists, they're not sabotaging things, they just made a mistake. They can potentially degrade the system. That there are 3 types of human errors. All right. Omissions, so just not performing the act or task. So if you think like the latest Boeing shenanigans, that they forgot to put the bolts into the plug door, that was an act of omission. All right, commission, accomplishing the task incorrectly. We torque things the wrong way. We assemble things in the wrong order or something. That they were doing things, but they did it incorrectly. And extraneous, performing a task that's not authorized. So doing things that you're not supposed to be doing. And the last one will probably be the biggest temptation going forward. Is undocumented maintenance, unauthorized maintenance, doing things that you're not supposed to do. So if you look at the Lear that's behind me, it's on a phased maintenance schedule. Well, those phases align with life limited parts and time, flight time, time that it's been on the jet, all those types of things. You want to do them in order and at the right times, or else you could jeopardize the entire system. And think about how complicated that plane is. You mess with one thing, you may think that, I just changed out a fuel filter. But what you don't see is like all the second and third order effects that changing that fuel filter a little too early or a little too late could actually have. So there's also 4 consequences to human errors. 4 consequences to human errors. So 1, you could have little or no effect. You did something you weren't supposed to do, you made a mistake or whatever, and hey, look, that's nothing happened about it. Now I'll tell you, this is probably the most common one, that like you'll do something wrong and then like the plane will come back and you'll think, oh no, like I screwed that up, and you'll go out there and you'll fix it. That happens more often than you would think. Next one is damage to equipment and hardware. Now, I used to do a lot of avionics work. And I'll tell you, that's the one thing that happens the most often in terms of like consequences to mistakes inside of avionics, is that like you short out a box, you fry some wires or whatever, or you're not grounded and you touch some sort of like ESD sensitive part and you short the board out and you don't even know it until you plug the box up. That's really common. Other things that could potentially happen is like hangar rash, that we moved some aircraft and we weren't paying attention, or we're task saturated, or there's too much going on, or we needed help but we didn't get it, and you hit a vertical stab on a hangar door. That's happened to me as well. I watched a guy who has 40 years of aircraft experience, ran his own very, very successful shop, and he had an Icon, and the Icon, the wings fold up. Well, when he put it out on the ramp, he forgot to chalk it. Well, a big gust came by, and it's basically like a sailboat. And next thing you know, the Icon just went like careening down the flight line and playing pinko with all the different aircraft. So that damage could potentially happen, and it's very, very expensive. It's very difficult to explain that to a customer that, hey, look, you entrusted us with your very expensive aircraft that you're very proud of, and we just destroyed it. Sorry. So let's not do that. Personal injury. This kid, I'll tell you another story that happened to me in Iraq. We were troubleshooting a engine leak. We were trying to see where it was at, and on that Allison turbine engine, the output shaft going to the tail rotor just sits there and it spins. And so you have the big engine right there, and right below is this output shaft that's just spinning like crazy. All right. Well, as I was looking around, I kept trying to get my balance, and as I got my balance, I wanted to reach up there and grab that shaft to kind of steady myself. And as I go to reach it, the guy that's on the other side of the helicopter from me grabbed me and pushed me back because he saw what I was about to do. And I was like, I kind of stunned. I was like, what was that all about? And then I realized the light came on, and he started laughing at me. He was just like, that was real close, and it was. Had I grabbed that shaft, there's no telling what would have happened. Luckily, I wasn't married then, so I wouldn't have had my ring on or anything. But that could have been very, very, very bad, especially with the counterweights that are on that shaft to help balance it. It could have really tore me up pretty bad, and I may not have the use of my left hand anymore. And lastly, catastrophic. Like if you make an error, who knows what could happen? You could bring an aircraft down. Now, luckily, this is fairly rare, especially on the maintenance side of it, that like an entire airplane crashes. But there was just a Gulfstream that they're still investigating down in Florida that crashed, and they know that it was a fuel starvation issue, and they know it just came out of maintenance. It's possible that they had worked on that fuel system and something wasn't done correctly. And then as they came into that critical phase of flight, and they're just a couple hundred feet off the ground, fuel goes out. The fuel goes out, engines go out, engine goes out, you lose airspeed, you lose lift, and down you go. And so you have to always be cognizant of the fact that you have people's lives in your hands whenever you show up for work. This is not a car. This isn't a house. This isn't anything close to any of those types of things. This plane behind me will get up in the air and will hold people's lives, their futures, their families, all in this little metal tube that flies across the earth. And you could do something not even meaning to, just making a mistake and just showing up a little bit groggy to work, and then or getting a little bit outside of your comfort zone, and cause somebody to die. And we don't ever want that. So in human factors, a quality system can only be assured when an internal reporting and auditing system is in place to assess and evaluate both worker errors and company culture. Now, kind of go back to Boeing. Boeing's kind of going through this right now. Like, what's their internal culture? What's the ethos that they're living by? You get to kind of like higher level things. There's a concept called systems thinking, and you judge a system by what it produces. What is it optimized for? And that's kind of what the FAA is looking at looking at Boeing right now. And they're saying, like, what are they optimized for? Are they optimized for profit and to meeting deadlines so that way they can maintain market share? Or are they optimized for safety? Now, obviously, as a regulator, the FAA wants it to be optimized for safety. And as a member of the flying public, I would like it to be optimized for safety as well. However, different internal factors will cause that optimization to shift, and the product that it produces will suffer because of it. So as you show up to your next job, always be asking yourself, like, what are we optimizing for? What are we here for? Are we here to constantly production, or are we here to make sure that we do a quality job, that we take our time, and we make sure that the jobs that we do are productive and safe, and that they're not, we're not, letting the bottom line drive us. That, like, look, if we know that this job is going to take, 5 days, we tell the customer, hey, look, this could take up to 10 days, and trying to build that expectation in so that way we don't have to rush to go through it, because once we start rushing, then we start cutting corners, and then people get hurt. Now let's talk about the dirty dozen. So probably the most well-known data associated with reducing the negative impact of human factors is the dirty dozen. It's a list of factors developed by Gordon DuPont from the Transport Canada. So thanks, Gordon. The following are these 12 issues. We're going to go over them one by one. So there's 12 of these. Lack of communication. So lack of clear, direct statements and good active listening skills. Now this is one that you will see wherever you go in and out of aviation. That like people have a hard time communicating. As you probably know now, I'm career military, and I'll tell you that like this is the number one thing that we tend to struggle with. Sometimes it's technology driven, that the radios just don't seem to work for whatever reason, no matter how hard our S6 works at and all his minions. But like, they just can't seem to work. So, and sometimes that's that. Sometimes it's because people have a certain mental model and they believe that things should work a certain way. And even as people tell them that's not how things work, they keep on just like, pushing that mental model into existence, even though that's not true. It's a communications failure because of a problem with the listener. Sometimes you have people that are the smartest people in the whole wide world. They know the system better than anything else, but they just can't articulate it. There's a book Dan Goleman wrote called Emotional Intelligence, and he talks about this electrical engineering firm where the CEO, even though they were hiring triple-digit IQs from top-tier universities, that the CEOs were always had like some of the lowest IQs, and he started trying to figure out why. And like to come to find out, the reason being is that the lower IQs could communicate better. They were more socially intelligent, and that is absolutely a factor in aviation maintenance, because just because you know how to fix the plane and you know what's wrong with it, if you can't communicate that information to a customer or to your fellow teammates, to management, it doesn't matter. Like so you have to figure out how to get around the communication problem. A complacency, self-satisfaction accompanied by a loss of awareness of danger, which means being lazy. That's a very fancy way to say like don't get lazy. Like even if the job that you're doing is totally minuscule, very, very easy to do, it's still an important job. You have to stay on top of it, and you have to make sure that that you show up with the same sincerity as you would a very, very important job. If I said, hey look, I need you to change a tire and I need you to do an engine swap, like you might get all excited about the engine swap because it's complicated and it's going to take a minute, and it's the kind of the mechanic-y thing that you want to do. That tire is still just as important, because if they land and you haven't done your job right and the tire explodes or comes off the rim or whatever, and it causes the plane to canter over on one side and then cartwheel, that person could still die, even compared to like the engine swap. So you cannot ever get complacent. You have to follow the book. You have to go line by line and say like, okay, now we're going to do this, now we're going to do that, and really stay true to that maintenance manual and do everything to 100%. This is not a job where you can sit back and only give like 50% one day or 50% the other day. Lack of knowledge, number 3. All right, lack of experience or training in the task at hand. Real simple. The reason why we have a core value here at our school as humility is because you don't know everything. I don't know everything. I will be the first to tell you that, I am not a structures guy. I don't think that way. I don't even really necessarily enjoy it. And so like that's not my forte. I'll also be the first to tell you that I'm really good with avionics. I'm really good at electrical troubleshooting. That's just something I've found out for myself as we go. I don't get excited about some things. I do get excited about others, and that excitement drives knowledge. And some of that knowledge I have, and some of that knowledge I don't have. And so you need to like go on a quest to try to discover what you're good at and what you're not good at, what you know and what you don't know. And then primarily is whenever you show up and they say, hey, look, if I ran my own shop and they said, hey, look, we had a bird strike and we need you to replace a bunch of panels on this wing, and it's going to take a lot of like sheet metal work and rivet layup and talking to engineering and all of this good stuff, I'm the first person to tell you, like, I'm not your guy. That's not my skill set. Like, you need to go and talk to another guy that is his skill set. And so you have to have that knowledge, and you have to have that humility to basically say, hey, look, this isn't me, this is somebody else. All right, number 4, distraction. Loss of focus, mental and emotional confusion or disturbance, drawing one's attention away. Now, this distraction is a big, broad, hairy topic, and it could be many different things. It could be something that's internal to just you. Like you could be like, super into some audio book that you're listening to as you're working and like not really paying attention to what you're doing. That's true. It could be working with like your best friend and the shenanigans that come with that. While we always want to try to work with people that we like, and we really want to be those types of teams, Sometimes working with somebody can cause a distraction, and that distraction could get somebody hurt. Sometimes, even taking a step back and looking bigger, your own life could be a distraction. You could be going through a really messy breakup, or you could have like some kind of external factor. And those types of situations, you need to have some self-awareness and to realize like, hey, look, this isn't going well for me, and this is going to cause a problem at work. And I need to go to my boss and say, hey, look, this thing is happening. Is there some sort of like, less critical function that I can do right now until I kind of get over to this point where I can really focus on the task at hand? And that's hard. That's a hard conversation to have. It's a hard to realize that, hey, look, there's something going on that I really need to kind of like rest and recock and then engage again whenever things have settled down. But that's your job as an aviation maintenance technician. Like, you need to be able to understand all those nuances that's going on in your life, so that way you can make those types of calls. So lack of teamwork, lack of working together to achieve a common goal. I'll tell you another story. I was working at a place, and we were troubleshooting a power feeder off of a number 1 engine on a 737. And this guy, he got tasked to do the seal work on the wings. So he's putting panels on the wings and sealing them up. Well, we went to lunch, come back, and there's a panel over the top of where the power feeders go through the wing. And I was just like, why in the world is there a panel on there? Did we fix it, or did somebody else? Is there another team working here that I'm not aware of? I start going around, I find this guy, and he's just like, well, it's my job to put the panels on, so I put the panels on. And I was like, did you not see the cannon plugs that were undone and taken apart inside of that panel? And he was just like, whatever, it's my job to put the panels on, so I put the panels on. That guy, like, 100% violated this rule of the Dirty Dozen. Don't be that guy. Always have a cognizant awareness of what's going on around you and who's working here or there or wherever, and try to help each other out. The reason being is that, like, it's not just because we want to be nice to each other, which we do, but it's also the fact that you have to understand that, especially if you're working in an MRO or an airline or something that's really big and complex with 40 or 50 people on a jet, is that you're just one cog on a big machine, and you can really kind of mess things up for other people if you do it wrong. So make sure that you prioritize teamwork. Fatigue. Weariness from labor exertion, nervous exhaustion, temporary loss of power, and the ability to respond. Now, this is a big one that will happen in aviation maintenance, and it will happen to you, I guarantee it. Because especially right now, whenever we don't have enough aviation mechanics worldwide, and there's like all this pressure for like, hey, look, we'll pay you triple overtime, we'll do this, or we need to get this done. There's always going to be this management pressure for production. At some point, you need to rest and recock and take a break. Now, like, there's tons of war stories of people that like have like cots in hangars, and they put up their cot and they sleep at the hangar, and that sounds really heroic and good and great and grand, but really, like, they really need to take a step away, because you're never going to be your best self whenever you operate that way. You have to take care of yourself. You have to take care of yourself physically. You have to take care of yourself emotionally. You can't get super, a lot of these jobs are really, really stressful, because there's like, you're always up against the schedule. You're always constantly pushing and stressing. Sometimes you just need to take a couple days off, go fish, go hike, go do whatever the thing it is that you do to kind of rest and recock. And sometimes, like, you need to take a break, cognitively. Like, sometimes these jobs can be very, very complicated, especially doing like avionics troubleshooting. It can be really, really, really difficult day in, day out, thinking on that kind of level. And so sometimes you need to embrace the simplicity of mowing your lawn. That here's the grass, here's a mower, go cut it, and just take a breather and just do something that's really, really easy at that point. All right, number 7, lack of resources. Failure to use or acquire the appropriate tools, equipment, information, and procedures for the task. And this is really kind of like, this is a difficult one, because this happens in aviation a lot, that like we need to get X, Y, or Z done, but we don't have the tool that we need. And because we don't have the tool that we need, we're going to come up with a way to make it happen. And there is a culture of kind of MacGyverness that goes on there, that people celebrate the fact that, like, hey, look, we didn't have this, so that we did X, Y, or Z. And we used to call building zombie tools, that like these crazy like contraptions that get to the thing that we need. Some of it's driven by resource constrained environments. They just don't have the money for it, and sometimes it's because you're just too lazy to go and find the right thing, or you're too cheap to buy the tool that you need. So don't let lack of resources get you hung up, because that is definitely a factor that will happen. Pressure, big one. Creating a sense of urgency or haste. Now, this is something that I love about aviation. I love the drama that comes around with it. Oh, we're cranking now. All right, so pressure. Creating a sense of urgency or haste. I really enjoy this part of aviation. I like the drama of it. I like the call to perform. Part of that is because I grew up as an aviation mechanic in the Army, and so that's a very high pressure environment whenever you're trying to fly missions, and you're the only person with an attack helicopter that those guys on the ground need. So I really kind of fell in love with the adrenaline rush of launching aircraft in there. But it can also be extremely corrosive to safety, because with that pressure, when you have those timelines start to weigh in on you, it becomes very, very easy to start saying like, well, we don't really need to do this, we need to do that. We can cut this corner, we can this is a kind of a duplicative effort. Sometimes that's good. You're trying to optimize for efficiency. A lot of times it can become very, very dangerous very, very quickly, because you end up cutting those corners. And so while you don't want to go slow intentionally, you don't want to go so fast and cave to that management pressure where you jeopardize safety. That's, once again, if you watch companies in the news right now, this is the human factor that's really, pressure, really causing a bunch of drama, because there's all this pressure to produce, to do these things, to really be super productive. And that's caused safety issues, because in order to meet those deadlines and meet those demands, you end up having people that they cut corners. And when those corners get cut, or whenever things get missed because they're going so fast, you compromise safety. Okay, lack of assertiveness, the lack of positive communication of one's ideas, wants, or needs. So here's another one that you'll see happen, is that you'll have some hard charging team lead or manager, or even sometimes a mechanic. They'll say we're gonna do things this way, and they get pushback. They're like, oh, that's not really what the book says. The task says to do things a little bit different, or whatever. And then they're just and then they just keep on pushing. You got to grow a spine. You have to grow a backbone and say, no, we're going to do things the right way. We're not going to do things, in kind of the shade tree mechanic, as one of my instructors used to say. We're not shade tree mechanics. We're aviation maintenance technicians. They're very, very different. Whereas you can get by with cutting corners with your car for a little while, you're not going to get by cutting corners with a machine that can't just pull over on the side of the road. So you have to take a lot of ownership in what's going on, and not be bullied into doing something that you don't want to do, or you don't think that you should do. That you should be able to stand firm and say, no, I'm the professional that's signing off this book. It's my signature, and we're going to do things the right way, period. Stress. This ties in with fatigue, but it is a little bit different. Stress: mental, emotional, physical tension, strain, or distress. Now, we've talked a little bit about how your entire life, your entire mode of being factors into this, not just the workplace stress. But let's talk about what workplace stress can actually look like. I once worked for a guy who was super quiet, very, very introverted, very, very professional, and it was really difficult to get a read on whether or not he was happy with what you're doing or he was mad with what you're doing. It was the most stressful environment I've ever worked at, and I've worked in places where there were people that were really good at killing folks were shooting at us, trying to kill us, and it wasn't nearly as stressful as working for that man. And so because you would do things where you're working, it's hey, look, is this you happy with this? And you're just and that's just all the only feedback that you get. So you have to be conscious of all the different types of stressors that are out there that can really weigh in on how you perform as a mechanic. Because sometimes the stress will get so high and so big that you start to think more about that, and you get distracted to where you compromise safety, you do a poor job, you don't do the best that you can do because of the stressful environment. If that is what's happening, you need to address it. You need to go to somebody and say, hey, look, this is not working out. This is causing a problem. I can't deal with this. We need to figure out a way to just de-stress. Happy people will end up producing really good products in the end. Unhappy people do terrible jobs. So make sure that you deal with that stress in yourself, and as you grow in leadership, Make sure that you do as best you can to de-stress the environment as much as you possibly can. So lack of awareness, failure to be alert or vigilant in observing. This is a thing that can absolutely wreck people's worlds. Think about like FOD incidences. People forget that I knew a guy one time, he got kicked out of an elite Army aviation unit because he left a can of paint inside the inlet of a helicopter. Now luckily they caught it on pre-flight. They didn't crank it and ingest that can. It probably wouldn't have killed anybody, but it would have been an engine replacement at the very least. But that lack of awareness, just like kind of getting distracted and like not paying attention to what's going on and not making sure that you have all the things that you're supposed to have, really is something that can jeopardize safety. Norms, probably one of the biggest ones to help curtail all of these, is informal work practices or unwritten rules that are accepted by the group. That we work hard and we work fast and we don't work by the book, and that becomes like the standard kind of operating procedure for a place. I worked at a place one time where that was the way that it worked, is that they never did any kind of by the book maintenance. They just simply wanted to do things their own weird way. And whenever I showed up and was like, hey, like, what's the task say? What's the torque on this? And they'd be like, oh, there is no torque on that. And I'm just like, there's torque on everything. Like, no. Like, one guy even told me to make new threads. And that was normal, and that was acceptable for what was happening. And so, like, you want to be cognizant of those group norms and how these human factors factor into it. So that way you can change them for the better where they need to be changed. And you can learn to live with them and how to kind of mitigate them with your own performance whenever you just don't have that level of influence yet. All together, all of these start to nest together and they twist together like a rope. There's 12 different factors, but if you'll notice, they seem to get repetitive, and that's because they feed off each other. If you have a super stressful work environment, then the norms are going to go sideways. It's going to cause a lot of fatigue, a lot of distraction. All of these things are going to start to play into one another and cause a bunch of problems. So therefore, pay attention to the dirty dozen, because they are what will make a good shop and a good mechanic, or they'll make a bad shop and a bad mechanic. All right, along with the dirty dozen, DuPont came up with what he called the Magnificent Seven. So let's dive into that. Subsequent to the development of the Dirty Dozen, the Magnificent Seven list of human factors issues was developed by DuPont and focused on positive aspects. Whereas all the Dirty Dozen is focused on the negative of things not to do, this is focused on the things to do. The following are the 7 issues. First, we work to accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative. So it means that you're always assuming noble intent of your other workers. That we're trying to say, like, hey, look, instead of focusing on what is wrong with the situation, let's focus on what's right about the situation and really fortify that. Safety is not a game because the price of losing is too high. This is not a game. This is like the way that we pursue excellence is by being as safe as possible. Because what's the price of a human life? It's something that philosophers have wrestled with for a long time, and the basis of Western civilization was in the fact that that humans are irreplaceable, that they're worth far too much to simply just cast off. And so we have to take that into consideration as well. 3, just for today, 0 error. All right, means that we need to focus on the present. We need to focus on what we're doing today, and not focus on the future or the past or whatever else. But to live in the moment, and we're going to focus on, well, how can we make the present task as safe as possible, and then go on to the next task and think, how can I make this task as safe as possible? Don't get distracted by what happened yesterday. Don't get distracted by what may happen tomorrow. Only focus on what's right in front of you. Give that your full attention, and you'll be fine. We all do our part to prevent Murphy from hitting the jackpot. So Murphy's Law basically says that whatever can happen will happen. So it means if we can leave a wrench in an engine and it FODs out over 20,000 feet and comes crashing down, eventually that will happen. Our job is to make sure that it's not today. Our signature is is our word, and more precious than gold. Trust is the coin of the realm, is what General Mattis used to say. Trust is the coin of the realm. And so essentially, like, whenever that we're delivering that jet back to the customer and we're saying like, hey, look, we've done our job, here's everything that we did, here's a logbook. At the end of the day, they have to trust us. The moment that we violate that trust, we take our value and we bring it down to zero. Nobody can trust us now. So why would they give us their airplane? Why would they give us a helicopter? Why would they give us anything to work on? Because once we say that we're doing X, Y, or Z, well, they can't trust us. So how do they know? We're all part of the team, all of us. So a lot of times you'll end up having like support staff in the front of an operation that looks like just like the old Aunt D secretary. That woman is probably the one that's going to help get you paid, get you taken care of, and everything else. She is just as much a part of the aircraft maintenance team as anybody else. Just like upper level management is just as part of the team as anybody else. Don't get super full of yourself and think like, well, I'm the mechanic, I'm like, kind of like the apex of it all. No, like you're one leg of a multi-legged stool. And so remember that and treat everybody that way, because we're all in this together. We win or we lose together, no matter what. Finally, number 7, we always work with a safety net. So just because I can do it by myself means that I don't do it by myself, that I have somebody else that is working with me. We always operate at least in a buddy pair, if not more than one people, because the simple fact of the matter is that like, if I miss something, this other person could catch it. All right, no human factors conversation is complete until you've at least talked about James Reason's accident causation model. So let's go over that and what that means for us. The diagram is often referred to as the Swiss cheese model and shows how various holes in different systems must be aligned in order for an error to occur. So think about like Swiss cheeses, all right? So Swiss cheese is a square with holes in it, right? As you look at a piece of Swiss cheese, you're looking through and you can see light through it. Well, if you have a stack of slices of cheese, well then you can't see all the way through it because the holes are all misaligned. But if you have multiple slices and all those slices are lined up and something could pass through, well, that's how you get an error. Multiple things working out to thwart you. All right, in Reason's model of accident causation, there are 2 types of errors that we need to discuss. One are active failures. Now, active failure is one in which the effects are immediate. So think of a pilot misses an approach, doesn't go around, and then takes it into the trees. Active failure. He made a mistake, and then boom, you get the consequences of that mistake. An example of this type would be an aircraft slipping off of one of the lifting jacks due to improper placement by the technician. So as we get to our aircraft jacking class, you'll see that there's these like little nipples that are on the bottom of aircraft, that the aircraft jack has a cup, and those cup goes right on top of that nipples, and that's how you jack them up. Well, if let's say you decide you're not going to use that nipple for whatever reason, and you jack some a wing up in some weird way, and it slips and then goes through the wing, well, that's an active failure. You decided to do something weird, and you got an immediate reaction to it because the engineers placed those nipples there for a reason. In this example, the aircraft jack is the approved item of ground support equipment and has been properly maintained. So that means that there's nothing wrong with the equipment. There's nothing wrong with the situation. You just did something weird. So that's an active failure. A latent failure is the other type of failure in Reason's model. So latent failure occurs as a result of a decision or action made long before the incident and the accident actually occurs. Now, it says the consequences of such a decision may remain dormant for a long time, so that someone makes a decision and it takes years for it to manifest. Whenever it finally manifests, boom, it explodes. So like you look at Boeing's door plug issue that's in the news right now. That's not the guy woke up one day and said like, I'm just gonna put these bolts in. It's not even that simple. The way that system works is that there's a ship side action tracker, a system to track nonconformities that need to get fixed. Well, based on that system and based on the way it nests into the other systems of production, it got missed. That's a latent failure. It's something that's baked into the DNA. It wasn't a matter of if it happens, it's a matter of when it was going to happen. Another example of a latent failure would also improve aircraft slipping off the jacks. But in this case, instead of you making some weird decision, it's because the approved jack was never purchased by management because of budget cuts or because of other situations. You had to kind of improvise to get the job done, and so you just had to use what you have, which is something that happens in aviation. Like sometimes there's the perfect thing, and a lot of times you don't have the perfect thing. You have to find something else to use, and whenever those go sideways, well, that's a latent failure. A reason likes to sum this up and tell us that the most common errors committed by aircraft mechanics are slips, mistakes, and violations. All right, let's talk about another accident investigation model called the shell model. All right, so the shell model is another concept for investigating and evaluating maintenance errors. As with other human factor tools, its goal is to determine not only what the problem is, but where and why it exists. It's trying to do a root cause analysis and get to the bottom of things. Not just blame the guy, but really understand what drove the error. The model examines the interaction of each of the 4 shell components and does not consider interactions not involving human errors. It means that a human error has to be a part of the shell model. The shell model breaks down into 4 different parts and pieces: software, hardware, environment, and liveware. The term software is not referring to the common use of the term as applied to computer programs. Instead, it includes a broad view of the manual layout, checklist layout, symbology, and language. Now, this is a major factor because the way that manual is laid out can really create more friction or take it away. Because as you go through there, if it's really muddled, if it's confusing, if it's hard to follow, if it's referencing itself in 19 different places, it's just a recipe for things to get missed. But if it's simple, it's concise, and it gives you the information that you need as you go down, well, then we can rule out the manual being part of the problem. Hardware includes such things as the location of components, the accessibility of components, and tooling. So if you have a component that's in a very difficult place to get to, and for whatever reason the mechanic fails in changing out something in that area, then the shell model will bring that to light, and it'll say, hey, look, yes, this guy made a mistake, but really the mistake came from the fact that y'all decided to put like 19 different things in his ways. So he's having to reach around, be upside down with his hand up there to try to grab this component. So the shell model takes that into consideration as well. Environment takes temperature, humidity, sound, light, and time of day factors into account. Look, let's just be real. I know that I'm at my best early in the morning. By this is mid-afternoon, I'm starting to fade. I'm trying to power through making this video so we can stay on a production schedule for these classes. I know that what you're going to get from me right now is not going to be what you're going to get from me at say 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning whenever I'm at my best and my battery's full and off to go. Same thing with changing, doing maintenance in adverse weather conditions. There is on a OH-58, there is a tail rotor vent filter on the back. It's a 15-minute thing. It's just break a safety, take the vent filter off, let it sit. That's for about 10 minutes, which if I remember right, it's 8 minutes. So that's like half your 15 minutes right there. Then you take it, and put it on there, torque it to 125 inch-pounds with 32,000 safety wire, and you safety it in place, and you're done. 15 minutes in and out. One time at Fort Drum, the weather was so cold that it took 2 of us to do it. I put my little bear gloves on when my buddy worked on it. He took, once he got to the point where he couldn't feel his fingers anymore, he put his bear mitts on. I took mine out, and mine was kind of thawed out, and I would work until I couldn't work anymore, and we went back and forth that way. It was negative 20, 30 out with a 60-mile-an-hour crosswind because we're in a big open field in northern New York in February. And that took us a long time. Now, what are the chances for error during something like that? It's pretty high. Same thing with heat, same thing with time of day, night. Environmental factors can really play a major part, and a lot of times we just kind of like grit and bear it and power through, and we don't ever really think about the impact that it's actually having on us, but it is a factor, and the shell model captures that pretty well. Lastly is liveware. So liveware relates to technician interaction with other people, both on the job and off. These include managers, peers, family, friends, and self. In the Army, I get to serve as a chaplain. It was really interesting to see how somebody's workplace environment often informed the way their home environment was conducted. If you have a really toxic workplace environment, a lot of times they bring that home with them. The same thing happens in reverse. If you have a really toxic home environment, they will show up and you'll get subpar work out of them inside the workplace. Now, this is something that a lot of people don't consider. They just think that, well, this guy's just a bad worker, or he's always grumpy, or he's always late, or he's always lost, or whatever the problem is. But the reality of it is that, like, we think a lot of ourselves, and we think that, like, we are in control of a lot of different things. But in reality, a lot of times things control us more often than not, that the situation that's operating is really kind of having a toll on us, and we bring that as we show up as, aviation mechanics. So there's something that we need to consider and always watch out for is watch out for what kind of baggage am I showing up to the job with, and what kind of baggage is the other guy showing up to the job with, and how is that impacting how we're doing maintenance? Because if I get into a fight with my wife and then show up to work and do a really bad job and get somebody killed, that's something that we need to always be thinking about.